Morning in Los Angeles was veiled in mist, a quiet gray blanket covering the entire St. Helena cemetery. The rows of cypress trees stood still, as if listening to a slow requiem, and the air carried the faint mix of lilies and cold incense smoke. Natalie Brooks pulled her coat tighter and walked slowly along the damp stone path leading to grave number 17. The sound of her heels striking the ground echoed softly and evenly, almost blending with the wind brushing past stone statues. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been here, perhaps 3 years ago, the day she left America with the resolve never to look back. 3 years since she and Amelia, her twin sister, chose to walk separate paths. Ahead of her, a crowd dressed in black stood in a circle around a coffin covered in white flowers. The priest's voice droned steadily through the microphone. "May the soul of Amelia Brooks rest in the arms of the Lord." That name made Natalie freeze. No, she had never truly believed Amelia was dead. But now, looking at the photographs, the wreaths, and the tear-streaked faces of old acquaintances, she knew this was no cruel joke. A light breeze swept by, lifting strands of her hair from beneath her hat. In that moment, several people turned and whispers rippled through the crowd. Someone gasped, voice trembling. "My God, Amelia." Every gaze fixed on her. The sensation was like being stripped bare before a sea of strangers, awkward, uneasy. Natalie knew why she and Amelia looked identical in every detail. Not just similar, they had once been perfect mirrors of each other, indistinguishable to anyone who didn't know them well. An elderly woman rushed over, grabbing Natalie's hand, trembling. You're alive! You scared us half to death." Natalie took a deep breath, her voice quiet but clear. "I'm Natalie, Amelia's sister." Silence thickened like fog. From the back row, a man rose. His tailored black suit hugged a tall, strong frame, his dark hair tousled by the wind, his eyes cold and deep like the sea before a storm. He walked toward her step by step, and the air seemed to grow heavier. People parted to make way. She had never met him, yet one glance was enough to know this was not a man one easily forgot. His gaze swept over her, lingered, and then he spoke low and rough. "Amelia." Natalie shook her head slightly, swallowing hard. "No, I'm Natalie." Another heavy silence fell. He looked at her as if he didn't believe, his eyes clouded with pain and anger. Behind him, someone whispered, "That's Christian Moretti, Amelia's fiancé." Natalie's heart skipped a beat. That name, Christian Moretti, had appeared in Amelia's letters, the ones Natalie had never dared to finish reading. The man her sister loved, and the reason she herself had fled America. After the funeral, a light rain began to fall. Raindrops tapped softly against the asphalt, forming silver streaks. Natalie stood alone beneath a black umbrella, watching the coffin being lowered, feeling nothing but an immense, terrifying emptiness. A voice sounded behind her, deep and commanding. "You should leave. It's not safe here." She turned. Christian stood there without an umbrella, rain soaking through his suit. Water dripped from his hair, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. He looked at her, his eyes burning with something fierce, almost desperate. "I don't know who you are," he continued, "but if you're trying to pull something to get information, stop before it's too late." Natalie froze. "I came to say goodbye to my sister." Nothing more. Sister, his laugh was cold. "Amelia never said she had a twin. And she never told me about you." Natalie replied softly but firmly. Her answer made him pause. A flicker crossed his eyes, surprise, maybe pain. He turned away, pulled a handkerchief from his coat pocket, and handed it to her. "Keep it. In this city, trust no one." Then he walked off, leaving behind a faint trace of cologne rich with amber and wood, a scent that felt both dangerous and magnetic. That night, Natalie returned to an old hotel near Hollywood Hills. The room was small, its white walls and window overlooking the city lights. She sat on the bed and unclasped a silver necklace, the only thing Amelia had given her before their final fight. Inside the locket was a tiny folded note. "If anything happens to me, don't believe what they say. Natalie sat still, her fingers trembling slightly. Who were they? Why had Amelia written that? A chill crept down her spine. Something about the funeral had felt wrong, the uneasy silence of the mourners, the guarded eyes of the security men, and especially the way Christian had looked at her as if he'd seen a ghost. Natalie opened her laptop and typed Christian Moretti. Dozens of results appeared: CEO of Moretti Holdings, a vast investment and maritime logistics empire based in Los Angeles. But the older articles revealed another side: money laundering, arms dealing, ties to the Italian Mafia. His photo appeared on screen, a half smile, eyes sharp enough to pierce through the glass. She swallowed hard. He wasn't just dangerous, he was a storm wrapped in human skin. At midnight, there were 3 knocks at her door. She hesitated. Peering through the peephole, no one there. Only an envelope on the floor, sealed with the MH logo and a red wax stamp. Inside was a single photograph: Amelia smiling, standing beside Christian, her hand resting on her stomach as if she were pregnant. Natalie froze. Her sister had never mentioned being pregnant, or engaged. Everything about the image was too perfect, too strange, like a missing puzzle piece someone had deliberately hidden. In the corner of the photo, faint handwriting read, "Don't dig deeper. Natalie. Some secrets are meant to be buried." She looked up. Outside the window, a black car sped away, its red taillights bleeding into the fog. In that moment, Natalie understood Amelia's death wasn't an accident. And Christian Moretti, the man who'd handed her that handkerchief that morning, might be the key to everything. She unfolded the handkerchief, a small monogram stitched in one corner. "M," with a barely visible line beneath. "You're not supposed to be here." Natalie gripped the fabric tightly, her gaze fixed on the city below. The lights shimmered like 1,000 lies. Somewhere in the dark, someone was watching her, waiting for her first mistake. Her hand trembled slightly, but inside, a strange fire began to rise: curiosity, anger, and something else she couldn't quite name, something that belonged to the man she'd just met. That night, at 2 a.m., Natalie was still awake. On her laptop screen, Christian's photo glowed again. His eyes made her heartbeat quicken, not from fear, but from something else, an inexplicable pull. As if, deep down, she had known him before, had met that gaze in another life, another dream. She smiled faintly, whispering to herself, "If you hid something, I'll find it." Amelia? Outside. The wind brushed past the window, carrying the scent of rain and the distant sound of sirens. And in that small room, a fate was quietly unfolding between a man burdened with sin and a woman wearing the face of his past. And perhaps, if you stood outside that window tonight, you too would hear a whisper in the darkness, half warning, half invitation. Don't turn around, the story is just beginning. Mornings in Los Angeles were rarely this cold. Sunlight barely touched the skyline, glinting off misted glass windows of high-rise buildings. Natalie sat in a small cafe on the corner of Melrose, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of cappuccino. Outside, the city was alive with noise, yet inside her was a strange stillness, a calm laced with caution. She couldn't shake the image of Christian Moretti from the funeral yesterday, the way he'd looked at her. His low, hoarse voice, coating every word in a chill mist. He seemed to exist between two worlds, one of brilliance and power, the other of darkness, where love and sin intertwined. Natalie unlocked her phone and stared at the unsent message. "I want to see you. We need to talk about Amelia." She had typed and deleted it dozens of times. Partly out of fear, partly out of curiosity, not just about Amelia's death, but about Christian himself, the man who could silence an entire funeral with a single look. Suddenly, the bell above the cafe door chimed. She looked up. Christian Moretti stood there, framed by the morning light, a cup of espresso in hand, his gaze fixed on her as though he had known exactly where to find her. Her fingers tightened around the cup, hiding her surprise. "You're following me," he smirked. "If I said it was a coincidence, would you believe me?" "No." Christian chuckled, a low, magnetic sound that was equal parts dangerous and alluring. Without asking, he took the seat across from her. "Natalie Brooks, I've done my homework. I figured as much. Art teacher in Prague, studied photography. No contact with Amelia for 3 years. You left the U.S. right after she got engaged." He spoke each word slowly, like reading an indictment. "You ran a background check on me," Natalie asked evenly. "I needed to know who's wearing the face of the woman I once loved. For a heartbeat." Her breath caught. There was something in his tone, not suspicion, but pain. A raw kind of pain. impossible to hide no matter how cold the voice carrying it. Natalie met his eyes and said quietly, "I didn't come here to haunt you. Mr. Moretti, I came to find out what happened to my sister." Christian's gaze lowered. He stirred his coffee absently, his voice soft as wind. "She didn't deserve to die. Then who did?" The question hung in the air. Outside, car horns mixed with faint music from the radio. "Finally," he said. Slowly, "You don't understand, Natalie. In my world, no one is innocent." He rose, placing a bill on the table. "If you really want the truth, come to the Moretti estate on Mulholland Drive tonight. But once you step inside, there's no turning back." He walked away, leaving behind the lingering scent of wood and amber and 1,000 unanswered questions. Night fell, and the city lit up. Neon lights glimmered across the winding road that climbed toward the hills. Natalie drove as instructed, her mind a storm of hesitation. Part of her wanted to flee, another part stronger. Reckless was driven by an insatiable curiosity she couldn't explain. The Moretti mansion emerged from the dark, a massive structure of gray stone, elegant yet cold, encircled by steel fences and guards. The gates opened automatically as she pulled in. Inside, Christian stood before a wide glass window, holding a glass of red wine. The light refracted through the glass, painting his cheekbones in hues of crimson beautiful and dangerous. "I didn't think you'd come," he said without turning. "I didn't think I would either," Natalie replied, closing the door behind her. He turned, his gaze cutting into her like a blade cold, yet simmering with hidden heat. "Amelia once stood where you are now. On a night just like this?" Natalie's fingers clenched. "And what happened then?" Christian set the glass down and moved closer. With every step, the air seemed to thicken. He stopped half a meter away, his voice a low rasp. "She disappeared. Without a word. 2 days later, I got a call. They said she died in an accident." "And you believed that?" "No, but sometimes belief doesn't matter anymore." Natalie studied him. Under the amber light, his eyes showed 2 shades brown and gray swirling like a deep whirlpool. "Who do you think killed her? I have a long list of people who wanted her dead." "And where are you on that list?" Christian pressed his lips together, a wry smile tugging at the corner. "At the top." The words sent a chill down her spine. Yet beneath the fear, another feeling stirred fascination. Something about him made it impossible to look away. He reached out, brushing a finger over the silver chain around her neck. This was Amelia's. "Yes, I gave it to her. In Venice." Natalie froze. "You gave it to her, commissioned it. Actually, the pendant had an A engraved on it." "But..." He paused, eyes darkening. "I don't remember what was written inside." Natalie held her breath. He didn't know about the note. Didn't know Amelia had left a clue. "Maybe she wanted you to forget," she whispered. Christian's gaze sharpened. "No, Amelia never kept secrets from me. Everyone has something to hide." Silence spread between them again. Outside, rain began to fall against the glass. Soft, rhythmic painting their reflections together, a man swallowed by shadow, and a woman bearing the face of his past. Christian walked to a cabinet, retrieved an old envelope, and handed it to her. "This is all that was left after Amelia's death. The police found nothing, but I think you should see it." Inside was an old photograph Amelia sitting by the seaside and a small note, the handwriting shaky. "If you're reading this, it means they already know." "Who are they?" Natalie asked. "The FBI, or whoever hides behind them." "You're saying my sister was involved with them?" Christian nodded slowly. "Amelia helped me clean a few accounts. Then she met someone, an agent. They wanted her to spy. I warned her, but she thought she could escape. And she didn't. No one does." "Natalie." His voice was low, smoky, and thick with regret like a confession wrapped in guilt. He stepped closer, his eyes resting on her lips. "You look too much like her," Natalie murmured. "Does that bother you?" "It terrifies me." The space between them shrank to mere inches. Natalie could feel his breath, smell the mix of wine and gunpowder, an intoxicating scent she hadn't expected to crave. "What are you afraid of?" she whispered. "That I'll fall in love again. And this time, the one who dies will be you." Her heart sank, not from fear but from the raw, painful honesty in his voice. He turned away, phone in hand, his tone suddenly sharp. "Leave, Natalie. Someone's watching you. You shouldn't have come." "What do you mean?" He pressed a button. A photo appeared on the screen, Natalie at the cafe that morning, taken from a distance. Behind her, the shadow of a man inside a car. "Who took that?" she asked, trembling. "I don't know yet. But if they're following you, it means you've stepped into a game you don't understand." He looked at her one last time, a look caught between warning and desire. "Go, Natalie, before I can't let you go." She didn't move. Outside, the rain mixed with thunder, marking the moment when every boundary began to blur. As Natalie turned to leave, she felt Christian's gaze on her back heavy, haunted, burning. Inside her, fear and attraction twisted together like twin currents of blood. The iron gate closed behind her with a deep clang. And on the other side, in the darkness, Christian stood at the window, wine trembling in his hand. He knew that from that moment on, the game had begun again, and this time, the one holding the final card might not be him. Morning in Los Angeles was pale beneath a bluish mist, that cold kind of light that wrapped everything in a thin, beautiful haze, making reality seem distant and unreal. Natalie sat by the hotel window, turning the old photograph of Amelia and Christian over and over in her hand, the same photo she'd received at the funeral. She had stared at it hundreds of times, yet still couldn't decipher the secret hidden behind her sister's soft smile. Maybe that smile had never been real. On the table beside her lay the embroidered handkerchief marked C.M., next to the hurried note written in Amelia's familiar handwriting. "If anything happens, don't believe what they tell you." She hadn't slept all night. Her thoughts spiraled endlessly. Christian, the FBI, the accident, and the strange silence of everyone who had once known Amelia. It all felt like an invisible web, a network of deceit tightening around her, and she was falling deeper with every breath. She decided to start where Amelia had last worked before disappearing a small art gallery called Lumen Studio in Silver Lake. The gallery was tucked away in a quiet alley, its ivy-covered walls faintly scented with oil paint. The manager, an older woman with silver hair named Lucia, recognized Natalie the moment she stepped in. Shock flickered across her face before giving way to a heavy sadness. "Amelia." "No, I'm Natalie, her sister." Lucia studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I thought so. You two look frighteningly alike. I need to know how Amelia left this place." Lucia sighed and turned toward a painting behind the counter, an abstract swirl of red and gray. "She came here 3 days before she vanished. Looked terrified. Said someone was following her. I wanted to help, but she disappeared the next morning. All she left behind was this." Lucia opened a drawer and took out a small silver USB drive. "She told me to keep it. Said if anyone with her face came back, I should give it to them." Natalie's hands trembled as she accepted it. "Did she say anything else?" Lucia hesitated. "Just one thing. If Christian shows up, don't trust him." Back at the hotel, Natalie plugged the USB into her laptop. The screen lit up, revealing a single folder, Project Halo. Inside were dozens of documents and photos, investment plans from Moretti Holdings, anonymous wire transfers, and several audio recordings. She clicked on one. Amelia's voice came through hurried, breathless, scared. "They think I'm just a pawn. But I know more than they realize. Christian isn't who you think he is. Nat, if you're hearing this, don't let him pull you in. He's not just a victim." Natalie froze, the air draining from the room. That voice Amelia's sounded like it was coming from beyond the grave, hauntingly familiar, heartbreakingly real. "He's not just a victim." The words echoed in her mind for hours. By afternoon, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. "You're touching something you shouldn't. If you value your life, leave Los Angeles." Natalie stared at the screen, her blood running cold. This was no longer a game. She remembered Christian's warning. Someone's watching you. But now, he was the one she couldn't trust. That night, as Natalie stepped out for a walk, She could feel it, someone was following her. Footsteps echoed behind her, steady, heavy, deliberate. She turned a corner, quickened her pace, her heart pounding. Suddenly, a hand yanked her into a dark alley. Before she could scream, another hand covered her mouth. The familiar scent of gunpowder and sandalwood filled her senses. Easy, the voice low, rough, unmistakable. "Christian," she whispered. He released her, eyes cold in the shadows. "I told you not to leave the hotel. Are you trying to get yourself killed?" "So you were following me. I was protecting you. Protecting me from who, the FBI or from you?" Christian didn't answer. He just looked at her, his face drawn, exhaustion and anger etched deep into his features. "Natalie, there are things you don't understand. Amelia, she didn't only work for me. I know. She worked for the FBI." He froze, his gaze darkening. "How do you know that?" "She told me." "You're lying." Amelia left nothing behind. She left everything behind, including her doubts about you. The space between them cracked like glass. Christian stepped back, something complicated flickering in his eyes. "I never hurt Amelia, but you didn't protect her either." A flicker of pain crossed his face, but he didn't defend himself. His voice dropped, rough and low. "Come with me. I'll show you what Amelia discovered before she died." They drove for nearly an hour west, toward an abandoned warehouse near the Long Beach docks. Night air rolled in thick with salt and wind. Christian stopped the car, killed the lights, and turned to her. "Stay here until I tell you." He opened the trunk, pulled out a handgun, and disappeared into the darkness. Natalie sat still, palms damp with sweat. From a distance, she saw flashes of light, heard muffled voices. Minutes later, Christian returned and motioned for her to follow. Inside the warehouse, the air reeked of oil and rust. In one corner stood open shipping containers filled with documents and dismantled computers. Christian shone his flashlight on a wall covered in maps and red string connections. At the center of the web of strings was a name, A.B., Amelia Brooks. "What the hell is this?" Natalie whispered. "An internal FBI investigation board. They were tracking the money laundering network inside my company, and they used Amelia as bait." He moved the light to another photo, Amelia with a gray-haired man in a blue suit. "Who's that Agent Henry Cole?" "The lead investigator." "And your sister's lover." Natalie's breath caught. "You're lying. I wish I were." Christian took a crumpled envelope from his coat and pulled out a photo Amelia kissing Cole on a Malibu beach. Natalie stared, frozen, hands trembling. "They used her to get to me to gather intel, and when it was done, they killed her. I found out too late. And you loved her." He looked away, voice faltering. "I don't know. Maybe I did. Or maybe it was just guilt." "And what about me?" Natalie asked softly. Christian lifted his gaze. His eyes held something unnameable tender, but sharp. "You remind me of her. And at the same time, you make me forget her." Outside, waves crashed against the pier, mingling with the first drops of rain. Natalie stared at the map again, her sister's name caught in the center of the red web. A chilling thought crept in. Maybe Amelia had uncovered everything, and that was why she had to die. "I have to find Cole." Christian shook his head. "Don't. He's not just an FBI agent. Cole works for the CIA, embedded inside the bureau to control the case. You have no idea who you're up against." "I don't care," she said firmly. "They killed my sister. I need to know why." Christian studied her for a long time, then stepped closer. The flashlight beam slid across his face, revealing the fatigue and hardness carved into it. He tilted her chin gently, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you realize you've just become a target too? If I were afraid, I wouldn't be here." The distance between them shrank again. For a fleeting second, Christian seemed about to say something, but only sighed instead. He released her, his voice lower, rougher. "You're not like Amelia. I know. No, you're much more dangerous than she ever was." From afar, the wail of a ship's horn echoed through the night. Natalie looked once more at her sister's photo, and in that moment, she understood. The web of lies didn't just trap Christian, Amelia, or the FBI, it had ensnared her too. With every step, She was sinking deeper into the maze of truth and guilt, where no one was innocent. And in the shadows, Christian Moretti, the man burdened by old sins, watched her quietly. His gaze a confession in itself. He knew that once this thread snapped, they would both fall together. Morning over the Lake Tahoe highlands blazed with light, as if the world had never known darkness. The sky was washed in pale blue, the water still as glass, reflecting the pine forests along the shore. But Natalie knew beneath that calm surface, everything was a facade. She stood on the balcony of the Moretti villa, fingers tight around a steaming cup of coffee. The rich scent mingled with the pine, sharp and bitter. For 2 days, she had been here for her safety, as Christian claimed. But the longer she stayed, the more she understood safety did not exist in his world. Christian appeared behind her without a sound. He always moved like the night itself, smooth, precise, leaving no trace. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, his voice low, smoky with the edge of cigarettes. "I think I deserve to see the sun at least once," she replied, "after so many nights of hearing nothing but gunfire in the distance." He smiled faintly, a tired softness flickering in his eyes. "I forget sometimes you're not used to how we live. I'm just not used to having 3 armed guards outside my bedroom door," she said dryly. He didn't argue. His gaze drifted toward the lake, silver light glinting off his eyes, cold and deep as the water below. "Christian," Natalie began quietly, "how long do you plan to keep me here until they stop looking for you? Who are they?" He was silent for a moment, then said softly, "The people who killed Amelia, and maybe someone who once worked for me." The words made her chest tighten. She looked at him, wanting to believe, but every time he lied. His voice softened like velvet, blurring the line between truth and deception. Inside the villa, Natalie had noticed one locked room. Each time she passed, Christian's gaze would flick away. That night, when he stepped out to take a call, curiosity won. The lock was mechanical. She found the spare key in the liquor cabinet. The room glowed faintly under warm light, smelling of new wood and dried roses. On the table stood dozens of photo frames, every single one of Amelia. Amelia smiling in the Venice sunlight. Amelia among rose gardens. Amelia in a wedding dress. Beside Christian. On the wall hung an unfinished painting. Under the dim light, Natalie's breath caught. The face on the canvas wasn't quite Amelia. It was her. She stepped closer, hands trembling. The strokes were rough, uncertain, as if Christian had tried to recreate Amelia, only to paint Natalie instead. Her throat constricted, jealousy, grief, and fear tangled inside her chest. The door burst open behind her. "You shouldn't be in here." Christian's voice cut through the air, cold as steel. Natalie turned. His eyes darkened, his fist clenched. "I was just curious. Curious about how I love or how I grieve. Curious who you really loved." He froze. A long moment passed before he took a step forward, stopping an arm's length away. "I don't know. Maybe I loved a memory. Maybe I loved my own mistakes. But when I look at you, I can't tell who I'm missing anymore." His words slid across her skin like a blade, sweet and painful all at once. Natalie wanted to step back, but her body refused to move. Christian reached out, his fingers grazing her throat, where the silver necklace caught the light. "This always finds its way back to me. Not everything belongs to you." "No," he murmured, "but the things I've lost always return wearing a different face." At that moment, a long, sharp horn sounded from somewhere down the valley, slicing through the quiet air. Christian turned sharply, voice snapping back to command. "Down to the basement. Now! What's don't ask, run!" Gunfire exploded across the cliffs. Glass shattered into 1,000 shards. Natalie screamed, ducking as a bullet whistled past her head. Christian grabbed her, dragging her through the corridor, his arm tight around her shoulders, solid, hot, alive. Outside, tires screeched. Headlights swept across the villa walls. Voices shouted in Albanian, harsh and chaotic. "They've found us," Christian said through gritted teeth. "They think you're Amelia. Why? Quiet. Save your breath if you want to live." He drew his gun and shoved her into a room below the stairs. The air was thick with rust and damp concrete. He locked the door from outside, leaving a thin line of light seeping through the crack. Natalie pressed against the wall, shaking. The sounds above echoed like thunder gunshots, shouts, breaking glass. She clutched her necklace, feeling the world collapse. Amelia's world. Christian's world now swallowing her whole. Then, silence. Moments later, the door flew open. Christian stepped inside, blood smeared across his shirt, a wound grazing his shoulder. Under the weak light, his face was pale, but his eyes burned like embers. "You're hurt," she gasped, reaching for him. Warm blood soaked her hand. "It's nothing. They're gone. Christian, you can't." He stopped her with a firm grip on her arm. "Are you all right? I think I might have killed someone." "No, you just survived. In this world, that's the only difference that matters." He smiled faintly, weary, broken. For the first time, she saw real pain behind his cold exterior. "What did you trade for this life?" she asked softly. "Everything," he said. "And now, I think I'm about to lose what's left." "What's left?" He looked at her, silent. In his eyes she saw something fragile, a wound that would never heal. Christian sat down, unholstering his gun. Blood seeped through his sleeve. Natalie hurried to find bandages and alcohol. "Sit still. You know what you're doing. I took first aid training. And I know wounds shouldn't leave scars." He raised an eyebrow, half amused, half surprised, but obeyed. When the alcohol touched his skin, he winced slightly. "Does it hurt?" "No. Just feels strange." "Strange? It's been a long time since anyone touched me without trying to kill me." Her hand froze midair. Their eyes met close enough for their breaths to mingle. Her heart raced not from fear, but from something dangerously alive. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "I only say what's true." Natalie lowered her gaze and wrapped the bandage carefully around his shoulder. When she finished, she said quietly, "You need rest. I'll keep watch. You think I trust you with a gun? If you teach me, I'll learn." He studied her, then chuckled softly. "Amelia never said that." "I'm not Amelia. I know," he said, voice low, almost an admission. "And maybe that's why I can't stop looking at you." Natalie's pulse quickened. She turned away, stepping toward the door. Outside, the rain had started again, tapping softly against the wooden roof and stone path. The faint scent of dried roses from the hidden room still lingered in the air, blending with the metallic tang of blood, sweet and bitter all at once. In the quiet darkness, as Christian sat by the window, Natalie understood. Something was forming between them, fragile, nameless, and far more dangerous than any bullet. And she also knew that from this moment on, blood and roses would not only mark their names, but bind them in an unspoken pact between love, guilt, and the destruction waiting just ahead. Morning at Lake Tahoe was veiled in a thin mist, the kind that felt like the breath of a dream. The first light of day streamed through the remnants of last night's rain, scattering across the wooden floor in golden streaks. Natalie woke up on the living room couch, where Christian had let her rest after the chaos of the night before. The air still carried the mingled scent of coffee and old gunpowder. She sat up and looked around. The villa was unnervingly still. Only the ticking of the old clock broke the silence, a quiet reminder that time was still moving, even if she no longer knew where the beginning ended and the ending began. On the table lay a note, written in Christian's firm, slanted handwriting. "Out checking the perimeter. Stay inside. No one can be trusted. No one can be trusted." The phrase echoed in her mind like a curse. Natalie stepped out onto the porch, the chill of dawn sinking into her skin. Under the pine trees, traces of the gunfight remained scattered shell casings, dried blood on the stone path, and the faint metallic tang of death. She turned away, trying to shake the images from her mind. But amid the wreckage, something caught her eye, a small, burned photograph tangled in a broken branch. She picked it up and brushed away the soot. The picture was half destroyed, but clear enough to see Amelia, standing in a room, one hand resting on her stomach as if she were pregnant. Natalie's heart stopped. She rushed back inside, digging through the folder of files Christian had once given her in the Long Beach warehouse. Photographs, records, documents, not a single mention of it. No sign that Amelia had ever been with child. A strange intuition urged her to reopen her laptop and check the Project Halo folder. Among the recordings, there was one file she hadn't listened to before last entry, MP3. Amelia's voice came through trembling, fragile. "If you're hearing this, Nat, it means things have gone too far. They know. They'll come for him. And for the baby. Don't trust anyone. Christian will never understand. Leave this place before it's too late." Natalie's breath caught. The baby. The words cut through her like a blade. Christian didn't know, or worse. He did, and had hidden it. A gust of wind blew the curtains open, snapping her back to the present. She stood still, realizing how far apart she and her sister truly were. Amelia the brave, secretive, reckless one might have lived her whole life carrying a truth no one ever knew. By late afternoon, Christian returned. His coat was soaked with rain, a streak of dried blood darkening his collar. He set his gun on the table and looked at her with that familiar, cold gaze. "What did you find while I was gone?" "Not much," she said, steadying her voice, "except that my sister was pregnant." Christian froze. His face shifted instantly. The silence between them grew dense and heavy. "Who told you that, Amelia?" "Impossible." His tone was low, tense as if he were trying to convince himself. "I would have known. I should have known. You didn't, Christian. You didn't know anything." The words hit him like a slap. His eyes darkened not with anger, but something deeper, rawer. He stepped back, hands trembling slightly as he lit a cigarette. "You think I didn't deserve to know if she was carrying my child? Why would she keep it from me? Maybe because she didn't trust you anymore." He turned away, smoke curling around his face, blurring the sharpness of his features. "Didn't trust me," he said softly, with a bitter laugh. "I killed men to keep her safe. I tore my world apart for her. And in the end, she vanished like I was the enemy." Natalie said nothing. There was too much in his voice, pain, fury, and a fragility he would never admit. "Do you still have that photograph?" he asked finally. She handed it to him. Christian stared at it for a long time, his expression tightening. "No, this isn't what I thought." "What do you mean?" "This was taken at the Venice Villa. At that time. I was in New York. I've never seen her wear that dress." "Then who took it?" "Someone she trusted." He dropped the photo onto the table and turned toward the window. The sunset burned red across the lake. The reflection glowed in his eyes like a warning. "I'll find out who took that picture. And if the child exists," he said, voice breaking slightly, "I won't let it live the way I did." That night, Natalie couldn't sleep. Rain whispered against the roof, steady and soft. She stepped into the hallway. Light spilled faintly from under the door of Christian's study. Through the gap, she saw him sitting at his desk, a glass of wine in hand, staring at a framed photo of Amelia. Beside it lay a pistol, gleaming coldly under the lamplight. Natalie stood quietly before speaking. "Do you think if my sister were still alive, she'd want to see you like this?" Christian looked up, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "You don't understand, Natalie. When you lose someone but still feel their breath around you every day, you'll do anything to hold on to the ghost, even if it means loving the wrong person." He set the glass down and rose to his feet. His steps were slow, deliberate. "You think I'm loving the wrong person?" Natalie's heart pounded as she took a step back. "I don't know who you're looking at anymore, me, or her memory." "I don't know either," he said softly, his voice hoarse. "All I know is when you leave the room, it feels like losing her all over again." She turned away, eyes glistening. But when he stepped closer, he gently lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "I know this is wrong, but sometimes mistakes are the only proof that we're still alive." She meant to say don't, but his lips were already on hers. The kiss was brief, unexpected, painful, and tender, like rain falling on a summer night. No words, only breath, and the weight of emotions held too long. When he pulled away, silence filled the space between them. She stepped back, her eyes wet. "You shouldn't have done that. I know. You're searching for Amelia in me, and I don't want to be her shadow." He lowered his head, voice breaking. "Maybe you're right, but sometimes you don't choose the person who makes your heart tremble." Natalie turned and walked out, leaving Christian standing in the dim light. Behind her, the sound of a glass shattering broke the silence like a memory that could never be pieced together again. Outside, the air was cold against her cheeks. Down in the valley, car lights snaked along the mountain road. The rain had eased, leaving only mist. She drew a long breath, trying to steady herself. Then her phone rang. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Natalie. The man's voice was rough, breaking. Don't trust Moretti. He knows about the baby. Who is this Henry Cole? I know where you are. Leave that place tonight. Her pulse stopped cold. Henry Cole, the FBI agent Christian had claimed, was Amelia's lover. Why should I believe you? Because he lied to you. Amelia's alive. Natalie's hand trembled. Her heart felt like it had forgotten how to beat. Then only static. The line went dead. Inside the house, Christian still stood by the window, his hand gripping the shattered glass. He hadn't heard the call, but his eyes were fixed on her, dark and unreadable, like the lake at night. And in that instant, Natalie knew everything had just changed. Love, truth, and the shadow of the sister she thought was gone, all were converging into a storm no one could escape. Night over Lake Tahoe was eerily silent. No stars, only a long strip of gray clouds stretching across the sky like a scar. Natalie sat in the living room, staring into the flames of the fireplace. The orange-red light flickered across her face, catching in her eyes filled with too many things: confusion, fear, and something she didn't dare name. She hadn't told Christian about the phone call the night before, about the name Henry Cole, and the words that had cut through her world like a knife: Amelia is still alive. It wasn't that she wanted to keep it from him. She was afraid it might be true, afraid of the look in Christian's eyes if he found out, and afraid of what the truth would do to her own heart. Christian had left early that morning, saying he needed to meet an old contact to verify some information. He hadn't said who. He'd only left a pistol on the table and a note that read, "If anyone enters this house and it's not me, don't ask. Shoot." Natalie couldn't tell whether to feel safer or more terrified because of that. By late morning, the sound of an engine broke the stillness outside. She jumped, rushing to the window. A black SUV had pulled up by the gate. The door opened. A tall man in a leather jacket stepped out. Not Christian. She backed away, gripping the gun tight. Then came the pounding on the door. Loud, urgent. "Natalie, open up. It's Damian Ross." The name froze her in place. She remembered Christian had mentioned him before. His right hand, his most trusted lieutenant. But how did he know she was here? "Christian sent me." His voice was rough, breathless. "He's in trouble. We have to go now." She didn't move. What happened? "Ambushed in San Francisco. I'm the only one who made it out. Christian's been captured." The words hit her like a blow to the chest. She unlocked the door but kept the gun raised, her voice trembling. "Why should I believe you? You don't have to. But if you stay here 5 more minutes, they'll come. You want to die like Amelia." The moment her sister's name left his mouth, something inside her snapped. She gripped the gun tighter and stepped out. Damian grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the car. "Move." The SUV tore through the pine forest, the villa vanishing behind them into the mist. Natalie looked back through the window for a brief instant. She saw a flash of light among the trees, followed by a distant explosion. Her heart clenched. "How long have they been watching him?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Hard to say. Maybe since Amelia was alive. You knew about her." Damian glanced sideways, a faint, crooked smile on his lips. "I knew everything about both of you, including the part where Christian couldn't tell the two of you apart." Natalie turned sharply toward him, stunned. "What are you talking about? You look just like her. Natalie, it's terrifying, but you're different in one way. You know exactly how dangerous you are." His words sent a chill down her spine. Outside, the winding mountain road unfurled toward the city. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong, but it was already too late. Damian turned onto a dirt road leading into the woods. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe. There's no such thing as safe." He laughed. "Finally, you understand." The car stopped before an abandoned warehouse. Damien gestured for her to get out. She hesitated, but his eyes cold, commanding left no room for argument. Inside, the light filtered dimly from a broken skylight, glinting off old wooden crates. The air smelled of rust and oil. "Where's Christian?" she demanded. "He'll be here soon." "You said he was captured." He shrugged. "I said he was in trouble." "What kind? You don't need to know." He took a slow step toward her, his expression shifting from mockery to curiosity. "You know, Christian once swore he'd never let anyone make him lose control. And then you showed up a perfect replica of the woman he lost. I'm not anyone's replica. No, not anymore. Now, you're his biggest weakness." Natalie stepped back. "What the hell are you talking about?" Damien gave a dry, humorless laugh. "I used to think Amelia was his only mistake. But no, you're the real one. You changed him, Natalie. And in our world, change is suicide." Her pulse raced. "You betrayed him. He betrayed himself first." A gunshot cracked through the air. The bullet grazed her cheek, splintering the wall behind her. She screamed, falling back, heart pounding. Damien stepped closer, gun still aimed at her. "I'm not here to kill you. Don't worry. They're paying a fortune to have you alive." "Who, Henry Cole? He wants to meet you." Natalie's breath caught. Henry Cole, the man who had called her last night. It was a trap, all of it. At that moment, an explosion thundered outside. The warehouse doors burst open, headlights flooding the room. Gunfire erupted, shouts in Italian echoing through the smoke. Damien turned, raising his weapon, but before he could fire, a bullet tore through his shoulder. He collapsed. Through the haze, a figure emerged. Christian covered in dust and blood, his clothes torn, his eyes blazing like blades in the dark. "I told you never to touch her." Damien coughed out a bloody laugh. "You're late, Christian." She knows now. Knows what Christian's voice was a snarl. Damien pointed weakly at Natalie. "That Amelia is still alive." For a moment, time froze. Christian went still. The gun in his hand slowly lowered. His gaze flicked between Damien and Natalie, between disbelief and dread. "He's lying," Natalie whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't believe him." Damien laughed, a raw, broken sound. "I'm telling the truth. I saw her in Serbia 3 months ago. She had a child with her. Alive. Christian. Alive." Christian's hand clenched around the gun, his face hardening to stone. "You're playing me." "No," Damien rasped, a smile twisting his mouth. "I just wanted to see your face when you heard it." The gun fired one sharp crack that shattered the silence. Natalie didn't even have time to scream before Damien hit the floor, blood spreading across the concrete. She screamed anyway. Christian stood motionless, gun still raised, his eyes hollow. Then he dropped it. The clatter of metal on cement echoed through the warehouse. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered, shaking. "He was dead long before the bullet hit," Christian said hoarsely. "He just didn't know it yet." He turned toward her, his eyes dark like a storm brewing from within. "Natalie, do you trust me? I don't know anymore. If Amelia is alive, then everything I believed, everything has been a lie. And if she's dead," she whispered, "then you just killed a man over a ghost." He grabbed her shoulders, his breath harsh, almost pleading. "I need to know the truth. You're the only one who can help me. Why me? Because when I look at you, I don't know who I'm seeing, and I need the answer to that more than I need my life." She looked at him, the man who had once been the hunter, now lost and haunted. The blood on his shirt hadn't dried yet, but the red in his eyes wasn't rage. It was desperation. Outside, lightning tore the sky apart. Rain poured down, mixing with the blood on the ground, darkening it to the color of wine. And Natalie understood from that moment on, every line between love and betrayal had vanished. They were no longer seeking truth. They were two broken souls, drawn together by wounds that refused to heal. And somewhere in that storm, something was stirring again, a name, a shadow, a promise left unfinished. Amelia. She was still alive. Or at least, her ghost had never left. The next morning, the sky over Los Angeles was strangely dim. A heavy fog blanketed everything, thick and torn like fragments of memory. The old SUV Christian had taken from a roadside gas station crawled along a damp suburban street. its tires whispering against wet asphalt. Natalie sat in the passenger seat, silently watching the world slide by. They had left Lake Tahoe in the dead of night, leaving behind the ruined warehouse, the blood, and the body of Damian Ross. Neither of them had spoken since. Both knew silence was the only thing holding them together, the only thing keeping them from shattering. Christian's hands were tight on the steering wheel. His injured arm hadn't healed, but he betrayed no sign of weakness. In the pale dawn light, his face looked carved from stone cold, impassive, and unreachable. "Where are we going?" Natalie finally asked, her voice low, as if afraid to break the fragile quiet between them. "One of my men keeps a place downtown. It's safe for now." "For now?" He glanced at her, weary but resolute. "Nothing stays safe forever, Natalie, especially when every secret starts to crack." His words felt like a prophecy. The apartment was small, on the 17th floor of an aging high-rise. Beyond the window, the city was swallowed by fog and the dull hum of traffic. Christian checked the locks, bolted the door, then finally sank into a chair. Natalie stood by, watching as he uncorked a half-empty bottle of whiskey and poured 2 glasses. "You should let me clean that wound," she said. He didn't answer at once. He took a sip, then set the glass down. "You don't have to do that. I'm used to it. I know. But getting used to pain doesn't mean it stops hurting." Her voice was soft, but it cut deeper than she meant it to. Christian said nothing for a moment, then unbuttoned his shirt. The rough bandage beneath was soaked through with darkened blood. Natalie sat across from him, disinfectant in hand. When the cotton touched his skin, he winced but didn't flinch. She worked carefully, almost tenderly. "Have you ever trusted anyone?" she asked quietly. "Trusted." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Trust is a luxury where I come from." "What about Amelia?" The air froze. Christian's fingers tightened around the edge of the chair. "I trusted her," he said finally. "And that's why I lost everything." Natalie lowered her gaze. She wasn't sure whether she wanted to hear that or not. That night, she couldn't sleep. Rain began to patter softly against the window, a whispering rhythm that filled the room. Christian sat by the desk, half in shadow, a lamp casting a golden glow over his face. He was sifting through a pile of old files, Amelia's records, faded photographs, fragments of a life that refused to die. Natalie rose and approached. "What are you looking for?" "A thread," he said. "Damian lied about a lot of things, but one name I can't ignore: Serbia. You believe she's alive?" He looked up at her, eyes dark and unreadable. "I don't believe anything anymore, but I have to know. Because if Amelia really is alive, I need to look her in the eye and ask why. Why she left you, why she made me kill for a lie." The words hung heavy between them. Natalie said nothing, but deep inside, she felt it too, that same fear of the truth. The next day, they left Los Angeles. A forged passport and a quiet bribe bought them passage to Belgrade. The city was gray, cold, and thick with cigarette smoke. Christian had an old contact there, Andrei Kostrenko, an arms dealer he'd worked with years ago. When Andrei appeared, Natalie immediately understood why Christian had once said, "In this world, the only difference between a friend and an enemy is the price." The man was huge, with pale, icy eyes and a smile that never reached them. "Christian Moretti," Andrei drawled, his voice deep and deliberate. "You're like a ghost. I thought you were dead." "Not yet." "And this is—" Andrei's gaze slid toward Natalie. "My associate." Andrei nodded slightly, though the look he gave her sent a chill down her spine. He gestured for them to sit. "I hear you're looking for someone." "A woman." "Amelia Brooks," Andrei chuckled. "That name?" "Yes, I've heard it." Christian leaned forward, his voice sharp. "We're a government hospital outside the city. 3 months ago, an American woman by that name was admitted. No one knows why she was under such heavy protection. Then, one day, she vanished with a child. The world seemed to fall away." Natalie turned to Christian. His face had changed completely. The control was gone. What remained was something raw and desperate. "Can you take me there?" he asked. Andrei smiled. "Of course. But, information isn't free. You'll have whatever you want." Andrei tilted his head slightly, eyes sliding toward Natalie. Anything Christian stood, drew his gun, and slammed it down on the table. Not her. The air froze. Andre raised his hands in mock surrender, laughing. Relax, old friend. You're still as volatile as ever. But as they left, Natalie knew that Andre's gaze had been no joke. And Christian knew too they had just stepped into something far more dangerous than either of them could control. The next afternoon, they reached the old hospital. The building was abandoned, its roof caved in, walls scorched and cracked with age. Christian led the way, gun in hand, each step echoing down the empty halls. Natalie followed close behind, heart pounding, unsure if it was fear or intuition. The air reeked of rust and decay. Nameplates in Serbian hung crooked on the walls. At the end of the corridor, Christian stopped. A wooden door stood ajar. He pushed it open. Inside, there was nothing but an iron bed and a single window cracked open to the fading light. On the table lay a sheet of paper, written in English. If you've found this, it means I'm still alive. Don't look for me. Christian, I'm not the woman you knew. The handwriting, it was Amelia's. Christian picked it up, his hand trembling. The dying sunlight spilled through the dusty window, painting the room in the color of diluted blood. She was here, he whispered. Or someone wants you to think she was. He turned to her, voice rough. No, Natalie, this is her writing. I know every stroke of her pen. She said nothing. Part of her wanted to believe him. The other part was terrified that belief would destroy everything. If Amelia really is alive, she murmured, what will you do? Christian's lips curved into a faint, weary smile. I'll ask her why she made me fall in love with you. Natalie froze. She couldn't tell if it was a confession or a punishment. But in that moment, she understood between them wasn't just the blur of memory, but a wound open, bleeding, and unhealed. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. The sunset cast a dark red glow across the crumbling walls. And in that light at the far end of the corridor, a silhouette appeared, a woman's figure, thin, wearing a white coat, long hair veiling half her face. Natalie gasped, her heart stopping. Christian, she whispered. He turned, but the figure was gone. No one there. Only the faint trace of lavender lingering in the air, a scent that only Amelia had ever worn. Natalie trembled, gripping Christian's hand. Did you see that? He didn't answer, but in his eyes for the first time in months, there was a glint of something new. Half fear, half hope. She's still here, he whispered. She never really left us. And Natalie knew the hunt wasn't over. It had only just begun. Morning in Belgrade was wrapped in a thick white fog, like a funeral shroud draped over the city. The old buildings stood silent, their walls stained with moss and soot. Out on the streets, a few military trucks blared their horns as they sped by, leaving behind the smell of gasoline and steel. Natalie stood by the window of their rented flat, watching the distant lights flicker across the surface of the Danube River. She could hear the sound of water dripping from the leaky roof steady, rhythmic drops that echoed in her mind, tangled and uneven like her own breath. Christian had hardly spoken a word since they'd left the abandoned hospital the night before. He'd sat in silence, hands clasped, eyes fixed on Amelia's letter, as if the ink itself might whisper answers he didn't dare to think. She understood something inside him had cracked. But what frightened her more was that his silence didn't feel like despair. It felt like a vow cold, resolute, and dangerous. You're going after her, aren't you? Natalie asked, her voice barely above a breath. Christian didn't answer immediately. He folded the letter, slipped it into his coat, and said quietly, I have to. What if it's a trap? What if someone's using Amelia to lure you out? Then I'd rather die searching for her than live with doubt. The words hit her like a blade. She couldn't tell what terrified her more, losing him, or watching him walk willingly into the darkness that awaited him. By noon, the phone rang. Andrei Kostrenko's voice came through rough and steady, laced with a mocking laugh. I found what you're looking for. Christian hung up without another word, grabbed his coat, and said, We're going. They met Andrei in a riverside warehouse. The dim yellow light cast half his face in warmth, half in shadow friendliness and menace sharing the same grin. On the table lay a thick folder. She left the hospital after being transferred to a humanitarian organization based in Montenegro. Andre said, pouring vodka into his glass. She changed her name. She's no longer Amelia Brooks. Christian's eyes narrowed. What name, Elena Bishop? And she wasn't alone. There's a child. About 3 years old. The air tightened. Christian staggered back a step, his hand curling into a fist. Natalie could see the veins pulsing in his neck, like a current of electricity reversed. 3 years, he whispered. That means... He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Natalie felt her heart sink into the cold depths of the Danube. Are you certain? Andre smiled, shrugging. In my line of work, information is currency. I don't sell counterfeits. But if you want to know where she is now, you'll have to pay with something worth more than money. Christian met his gaze. What do you want? Andre opened a drawer and tossed a sealed envelope onto the table. A deal, a weapons shipment to the South Slavs. I need you to guarantee it runs safely one day, one night. After that, I'll tell you where Amelia's hiding. Natalie stepped forward sharply. You can't trust him. It's a setup. Christian turned to her, his expression eerily calm. I've lived my whole life inside traps. Natalie, what's one more? That night, they reached the old docks. The sky was pitch black, the moon swallowed by clouds. The air smelled of oil and cold seawater. Heavy metal crates swung overhead, creaking on rusted chains. Andre stood with several men in dark coats, speaking to another group in hushed tones. Natalie watched from the shadows, her pulse racing as Christian stepped into the open, his long coat billowing in the wind. His eyes scanned the area, sharp and alert. Then a scream. A blinding beam of light cut down from above. Gunfire exploded. Bullets ripped through the air. Andre's men fell before they could react. It's a trap, Christian shouted, grabbing Natalie and pulling her behind a cargo container. Gunpowder filled the air. Muzzle flashes tore through the darkness. Christian fired back, moving fast and precise. A bullet grazed his cheek, blood streaking down his neck. Natalie fumbled with the magazine, her hands shaking, doing exactly as he'd taught her. Christian, she yelled. Behind you. He spun, shot twice, both targets down. The echoes of gunfire rolled across the dock, blending with the crash of waves. Andre was shouting something in the chaos. Then he was gone. Christian dragged Natalie down a metal walkway. Breath ragged, rain began to pour, soaking them both, washing blood into the sea. Near the exit, a shadow stepped into their path. A woman, tall, draped in a gray coat, her hair drenched, clinging to her face. She lifted her head, and Natalie froze. Amelia? No dream this time. The face was hers identical. Every line and curve like a reflection, but the eyes were different, calm, distant, cold. Christian, she said softly, her voice sharp as glass. Stop. Christian froze. His gun slipped from his hand and clattered against the steel floor. Amelia, he breathed, as if the very sound might shatter her image. She smiled faintly, a pale ghost of a smile. I told you not to look for me. Why? His voice broke. Why did you vanish? Why let everyone believe you were dead? Because it was the only way the child could live. Christian went rigid, his pulse visible in his throat. The child. Is it mine? He whispered. Amelia said nothing, then slowly. She nodded. The world fell silent. Natalie no longer heard the rain or the waves or the gunfire, only the pounding of her heart. It felt like the whole world had narrowed to that one fragile instant. I killed so many men searching for you, Christian said hoarsely. I thought I was avenging your death. I know, Amelia replied, her voice gentle but distant. That's why I couldn't come back. You're not the man you were. Christian, I was never a good man. No. But you used to know how to love. Now you only know how to destroy. Her words fell like cold rain. Natalie stood between them, feeling like a ghost trapped between past and present. She wanted to speak, to scream, but no sound came. I didn't come here to destroy, Christian said slowly. I came to end this, whatever it takes. Amelia stepped closer, the light slicing across her face, half shadow, half sorrow, beautiful and fatal. Then end it by letting me go." "No," Christian whispered. "Not while I'm still breathing." The gunshot cracked the air. No one knew who fired first. A flash, a scream, the scent of gunpowder flooding their lungs. Natalie felt pain searing through her shoulder. She saw Christian lunge forward, saw Amelia collapse too, crimson blooming across her chest. The world tilted, rain, shouts, then only chaos. Christian cradled Amelia in his arms, whispering words Natalie couldn't hear. "It's all right," Amelia breathed, voice as thin as air. "Now you can forgive yourself." She smiled one last time and went still. Natalie forced herself upright, blood from her shoulder mixed with rain, dripping onto the steel floor in long, dark streaks. Christian didn't move. His eyes were hollow, fixed on the woman who had haunted him half his life. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Outside, the clouds began to break. A faint morning light slipped through, spilling across the rusted dock. Natalie looked at him and saw that there was no anger left in his eyes, no hatred, no pain, only emptiness. She knew, then, that for him this wasn't an ending. It was a blood covenant, a vow written in crimson, binding love and death together forever. That morning, the dawn over the Danube was so cold it felt as though even the river had forgotten how to breathe. Fog hung thick over the water, veiling the bridges and the faint yellow lights across the opposite bank. Natalie sat slumped against the rusted wall of the warehouse, her shoulders still bleeding, though she no longer felt pain. Everything around her, the rain, the distant sirens, even the rhythm of her own heartbeat seemed to fade into a vast, soundless void. Before her, Christian was kneeling, his arms wrapped around Amelia's lifeless body like a man who had just lost the world itself. His shirt was drenched, clinging to his skin with blood and rain. His eyes were open, but the light inside them was gone. The wind carried the scent of gunpowder, mixed with the faint trace of lavender from Amelia's hair, the same scent that once filled their home in Lake Tahoe with warmth, now turning the air frigid and suffocating. Natalie wanted to move, to speak, but her legs refused to obey. Between them, only one sound broke the silence. Christian's trembling whisper to the dead woman in his arms. "You lied to me, Amelia, but I still can't hate you." The words drifted into the cold air weightless, yet unbearably heavy. He pressed one last kiss to her forehead before gently laying her down on the steel floor. When he rose, his eyes found Natalie. For a fleeting second, she saw in them not only grief, but surrender. A quiet acceptance of something far beyond redemption. "You were right," Natalie whispered, voice shaking. "Your love, it never dies. It just changes shape." Christian stepped closer and helped her up. His hand was warm, but trembling. "You need a doctor. And you—" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned back toward Amelia's body, staring for a long moment. Then, reaching into her coat pocket, he drew out a folded piece of paper. Inside was an old photograph Amelia holding a small boy, perhaps 2 years old, with large, bright eyes that mirrored Christian's own. Natalie stared at it, her heart tightening. "That's your son." He nodded faintly, eyes fixed on the photo. "I thought I was chasing her," he said quietly. "But what I really lost wasn't a woman, it was the chance to be a father. Where's the child now?" Christian let out a hollow, weary laugh. "Somewhere safer than us. I hope. Or maybe he's growing up in the shadows, carrying a bloodline he never chose." His voice broke. Natalie said nothing, only placed her hand over his, feeling the cold of his skin. They left the docks before the police arrived. Christian drove through the outskirts of the city, silent the entire way. Natalie watched him under the dim light, his face hollow, his eyes sunken, like a man who had returned from death but hadn't found a reason to keep living. When they reached the old bridge outside Budapest, he stopped the car. The river below flowed black and still. The morning light had already faded into a pale streak of gray. "You can leave from here," he said. "There's a train to Vienna tonight. There's money in the glove box. What about you?" He smiled faintly, a smile with no trace of hope. "I'm going to end it." "End it how?" "By confessing." Natalie froze. "Christian, are you insane? If you turn yourself in, they'll never let you go. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want it to stop." He turned toward her then, and the look in his eyes made her heart tremble deep. Still and resolute. "I've lived too long surrounded by death. Amelia, Damien, Andre, 100 others. They're all ghosts I carry. Maybe it's time to let them rest with me. You can't carry all that alone. I'm not carrying it for them. I'm carrying it for myself." She wanted to stop him, to tell him they could still run, start over somewhere far away. But when she met his eyes, she knew words were useless. Some people, she realized, weren't meant to be saved. They were meant to finish their tragedy on their own terms. He opened the door and stepped out. The wind tore at his hair. She followed. "Christian." He stopped, turning back to her. "You gave me something I never thought I could feel again, trust. Even for a moment. That was enough. Don't talk like this is goodbye." He smiled faintly. "You know, Natalie, in my whole life, there were only 2 women who made me forget who I was. One taught me how to love. The other taught me how to let go." Her heart clenched. She wanted to reach for him, but he had already stepped back. Then he turned away and walked toward the end of the bridge. She could only watch as his figure dissolved into the gray mist swallowed by the sound of approaching sirens. 2 days later, the news spread across Europe. Notorious crime lord Christian Moretti confesses to all charges tied to international arms trafficking. Authorities said he was cooperating, providing information on multiple underground networks. No one knew why he had turned himself in. Natalie read the headline from a small hotel room in Vienna. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. It all felt like a dream that refused to fade. She set the phone down and touched her shoulder. The wound had healed, but the ache remained. She knew some wounds never closed. They only buried themselves deeper, waiting to be remembered. A month later, a plain envelope arrived, no sender, no return address. Inside was a letter, written in Christian's sharp, slanted handwriting. "Natalie, I once thought prison was the end. But sitting here, between gray walls and perfect silence, I've learned that the real ending comes when a man stops fighting himself. I lied to you about many things, but not about how I felt. I didn't love you because you reminded me of Amelia. I loved you because, for the first time, I saw in your eyes something I'd lost long ago. Compassion. If you still have the photo of the boy, promise me one thing: don't look for him. Don't let him grow up under the curse of the Moretti name. Freedom takes many forms. Natalie, maybe for me, freedom is knowing I can think of you without fearing that anyone can take that away. Christian." At the bottom was a single fingerprint in red ink, small, but clear, like a seal of blood. Natalie folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. Her tears fell silently, not in grief, but in something deeper, quieter. She didn't know if Christian was still alive or locked away forever somewhere in the dark. But she believed he would keep his word. She stepped out onto the balcony. Below, the streets flowed with black umbrellas and hurried strangers like a current of memories passing by. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. For a moment, she felt a presence watching her from afar, gentle and silent. Maybe it was only her imagination, but she smiled anyway, because even though everything had ended in blood, one thing had survived: love. Twisted, broken, but real. Natalie went back inside, opened her worn notebook, and began to write the first lines. "The man I loved once made the world tremble, but to me, he was the only one who knew how to love with a heart full of scars." The pen stopped. The ink dried slowly. Outside, the first sunlight after days of rain streamed through the window, falling across Christian's letter. The red fingerprint gleamed half blood, half dawn. And in that light, Natalie understood their story had never been a curse. It was a truth written in love and the price that love demanded. 10 years later, New York lay draped in the pale gray of winter. The Hudson River flowed slowly, city lights shimmering upon its surface like scattered stars adrift. The city was still loud, still restless, yet to Natalie, it felt like a film running in slow motion, every frame echoing memories that had long passed. She lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn, 8th floor, with a balcony facing east where the sun rose each morning. The room was filled with books, handwritten manuscripts, and the mingled scent of roasted coffee and old wood. For 10 years, She had written to live, to remember, to preserve the shadow of someone whose name she no longer dared to speak. Her first novel, The Man with the Red Fingerprint, had stirred waves in the publishing world. People asked her who the man in the story was. She only smiled. A man who chose freedom within captivity. No one understood, and she didn't need them to. One February morning, as light snow drifted outside her balcony, Natalie received a letter with no return address, yellowed paper, black ink, the handwriting sharp, slanted one she had carved into memory Christian Moretti. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. Inside was a single line. Freedom has many forms. You are mine. No signature. No date. Only a blurred ink mark as though written under the dim light of a prison cell. She stared at it for a long time, until her tears fell, blending with the stain bridging two fragments of time once torn apart. That evening, she went to the old pier, the place she had written as the ending scene of her novel. The river was black and thick, glimmering faintly beneath yellow lamps. She remembered every word, every breath he had spoken, the burn of whiskey on his lips, the husky voice that once whispered, "I just want peace, even if only for a night." She smiled softly. You always keep your promises. Christian. A cold wind swept by, tugging at her scarf. She pulled it close and looked out across the mist. And then, through the haze and the glow of a passing ferry, a black car stopped at the end of the pier. The door opened. A man stepped out tall, wearing a long coat, his movements slow but sure. His hair was streaked with silver now. His face bore the faint lines of time. But his eyes, those eyes were the same, deep, fierce, unyielding. She couldn't breathe. Christian stopped before her. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Their breaths mingled in the cold, dissolving and meeting again, as though fate had waited precisely for this moment. You, Natalie whispered, her voice breaking. You're alive. He smiled the same smile as before, softer now, quieter. I told you, didn't I? I always keep my word. How did you get out? They needed a devil who knew how to keep secrets, he said with a shrug. After 10 years, they gave me the only thing I ever wanted, freedom. She looked at him, tears streaming freely. Did you come here to say goodbye? Christian said nothing. He took a step closer, close enough for his breath to brush against her cheek, carrying the scent of skin, wind, and memory. No, he said softly. I came to ask if you ever forgave me. She met his gaze. For years she had wondered what she would say if this moment ever came. But now, every word dissolved. Only her heartbeat remained wild and trembling, like the first time she had ever loved. I never needed to forgive you, she whispered, because all you ever did was love me in your own way. Christian lowered his head. His lips brushed her forehead, gentle, almost sacred. A kiss without regret, without desperation, pure as the dawn he once promised to show her. I dreamed of this moment for 10 years, he murmured. But in the dream, you always turned away, because in dreams, you never truly came back. He smiled faintly, their fingers intertwined, warmth spreading between them, soft, steady, healing even the oldest scars. And the child, she asked, her voice trembling. He's growing up in Italy, Christian said quietly, with good people. I don't want him to know who I am. Sometimes, the truest love is letting someone forget where the pain began. You've changed so much. No, I just finally learned that some people can't save the world. They can only save one heart. And I chose yours. His words floated like windlight, but carved deep. They sat together on the old wooden bench by the pier. The city lights glimmered behind them, but within them was only stillness. Christian spoke of the years in prison where time crawled, each day stretching into a lifetime. He said that some nights, when he heard the rain, he imagined her outside the bars, reading the unfinished words he'd once written. Natalie said nothing. She rested her head on his shoulder. She didn't ask about the past, because both knew answers would only reopen old wounds. When the station clock struck midnight, Christian stood. He looked at her eyes, calm, sad, and free. I have to go. Where far? Far enough to be forgotten, but close enough to see you in your words. Will you come back? He shook his head gently. No need. You're my freedom now. He turned away. The wind rose, scattering flakes of snow around him. Natalie watched until his silhouette disappeared into the mist. No goodbyes, because they both knew some loves don't need endings. They simply exist. She walked back toward the city, her steps slow but steady, as if stitching two broken lives together again. In her coat pocket, the old letter from him still rested, the ink stain long dry. Yet every time she touched it, her heart beat to the same rhythm as his two souls once lost, found again in the chaos of the world. A year later, her new book was published, Blood Covenant of the Free Souls. In the dedication, she wrote, for the man who chose to love me through all the world's mistakes. If you ever read this, know that I still carry your light within me. Critics called it a love song for the lost, but only she knew it was the final chapter of their story, a chapter that ended without a full stop. Outside, the spring wind drifted through the half-open window, carrying a faint trace of salt from the sea. From afar, a ship's horn echoed long, low, then fading into silence. Natalie lifted her head and smiled, because she knew somewhere out there, beneath the same endless sky, Christian was hearing it too, and smiling back. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel and share your thoughts below. Every comment is a spark that keeps stories like this alive, reaching the hearts they were meant for.